The time is 1:45. This is the BBC for mothers and children at home. Are you ready for the music? When it ends, Eileen Browne will be here to speak to you.
Good afternoon. Let's sing about the Pussycat who went up to London to look at the Queen. You know what happened there, don't you?
Pussycat, Pussycat, where have you been?
I've been up to London to look at the Queen.
Pussycat, Pussycat, what did you there?
I caught a little mouse under her chair. Meow.
I wonder whether the pussy meowed like that in the Queen's palace. I expect she was saying good morning to the Queen.
Pussycat, Pussycat, where have you been?
I've been up to London to look at the Queen.
Pussycat, Pussycat, what did you there?
I caught a little mouse under her chair. Meow. Meow.
Pussycat, Pussycat, where have you been?
I've been up to London to look at the Queen.
Did you hear the big clock strike 3? 3 o'clock? I think it was to tell that pussycat it was time to go home. And we're going to have a story about another pusscat. Here's Julia Lang to tell it to us.
Good afternoon. I'm going to tell you a story called Big Fat Puss-Cat. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Big Fat Puss-Cat lay sleeping on the wall in the garden in the sun. She slept and slept. Toby Dog came out into his garden next door. He ran round and chased his tail and barked. Then he saw Big Fat Puss-Cat asleep on the wall. "Hey, you! Big Fat Puss-Cat," he said. "What are you doing on that wall, you lazy old Big Fat Puss-Cat?" The Big Fat Puss-Cat opened one eye and looked down on Toby Dog. "Why make all that fuss and bother?" she said. "I am sleeping on this wall now." "Do you know," said Toby Dog, "do you know you're the biggest, fattest pusscat I ever saw?" "I know I'm a big fat pusscat," she said. And she smiled and curled herself round and tucked her furry tail between her front feet and over her big fat nose and went to sleep again. After a little while, Wally Tortoise came slowly through the grass and stopped in the cool shade of the wall where Big Fat Pusscat was sleeping. He looked up at the wall and said, "Really, Big Fat Pusscat, must you sleep all day? I remember when you were a tiny little kitten. You were as pretty as a picture. But now you are just a big fat pusscat because you sleep all day." Big Fat Pusscat kept her eyes closed, but she said, "I like being a big fat pusscat, Wally Tortoise. I like it." She began to purr to herself, and soon she was asleep again. After a little while, Mrs. came out of the house to shake the mats and said to herself, "Oh, there's that big fat pusscat of mine, lazy old pusscat." And she went on shaking her mats, and the dust came flying out. Up and up into the air it went, and all over the garden it spread, and all over Big Fat Pusscat. Suddenly, Big Fat Pusscat sneezed. "Serves you right, Big Fat Pusscat," said Mrs., and she laughed. "You're so fat and sleepy, it'll do you good to sneeze. Why haven't you chased that little mouse away?" sneezed Big Fat Pusscat. "You're too lazy, that's what it is," said Mrs. "Every night that mouse laughs at you, Big Fat Pusscat, when it sees you asleep all the time." Big Fat Pusscat sat up and blinked. "I never heard a mouse," she said. "Of course you never heard a mouse," said Mrs. "How can you hear anything when you sleep all the time?" Big Fat Pusscat got down from the wall and walked away, waving her tail in the air. She was thinking, and she made a plan. That night, Big Fat Pusscat lay in her basket under the kitchen table as usual. But she kept awake all night. She only pretended to be asleep. Soon she heard a little noise. Pusscat opened one eye and saw the little mouse walking across the floor. So she shut her eye quickly. The little mouse looked at Big Fat Pusscat and giggled. "Oh, Big Fat Pusscat's fast asleep again," he said. "Lazy old Pusscat, fat old Pusscat, big old Pusscat." Big Fat Pusscat kept very still. The little mouse walked away, humming to himself, "Ding dong bell, pussy's in the well." But before he'd gone very far, Big Fat Pusscat got up and arched her back and spat. "Get out of my kitchen," she said. "Shoo! Be off with you! Be off with you! Don't ever dare to come back again or I'll catch you." Psst. The little mouse was so surprised that he slid right across the floor, bang against the wall. Then he picked himself up and went head over heels down into his little hole and never came into the kitchen again. In the morning, when Mrs. came into the kitchen, she said, "Did that cheeky mouse come again?" "Yes," said Big Fat Pusscat, "but he won't come again. I blew him across the kitchen and right down his hole." "There's a good, clever Pusscat," said Mrs. "You shall have a nice big dinner of liver today and fish tomorrow. You're a beautiful Big Fat Pusscat." "I like being a big fat Pusscat," said Big Fat Pusscat, and she purred and purred and purred until she fell asleep.
Goodness me, what a fright big fat Puss-Cat gave that cheeky little mouse. I should think he kept inside his hole for a very long time after that. Do you remember the song about the little crooked man who walked a crooked mile? He had a little cat, hadn't he? There was a crooked man, and he walked a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence against a crooked stile. He bought a crooked cat that caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in a little crooked house. There was a crooked man, and he walked a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence against a crooked stile. He bought a crooked cat that caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in a little crooked house. I'll say that rhyme again, without the music this time. Will you help me? I'll say, there was a crooked, and we'll both say, man. He walked a crooked mile, like that. Ready? There was a crooked man, and he walked a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence against a crooked stile. He bought a crooked cat that caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in a little crooked house. I'm going to say a poem for you now. It's really a little joke. Listen. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Hush, what's that? Can it be a tiny mouse hiding from a cat? Squeak, squeak, squeak. There it is again. Right outside this very door, I heard the sound quite plain. Squeak, squeak, squeak. No, don't run away. It's only Billy's new black shoes, first time on today. There, I told you it was a joke, didn't I? It wasn't the sound of a squeaking mouse. It was Billy's new shoes. New shoes do squeak like that sometimes, don't they? And now about tomorrow. Well, Daphne Oxenford will have a story for us called John's New Hat. And we'll sing Simple Simon and a song about that funny man named Aiken Drum. So I'll say goodbye until tomorrow. Goodbye.